GPU rental rigs are the best way currently that you can make some passive income at home with your leftover GPUs and CPUs. But do you need to spend a fortune to make a bunch of money, or can you get away with a budget build and still make some profits? Well, today I'm going to take you through two different builds I've got myself: a budget 4060 Ti build and a super high-end 5090 GPU rental rig. And I want to take you through all the numbers. What did they cost? How much are they making per day? How much electricity are they using? And how long, if ever, will they take to pay themselves back? So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, let's take a look at these builds in particular and have a look at some of the parts. We won't go too detailed into them just yet, as we'll do that all on the PC. But the main components, obviously, we've got this 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti right here. This is an MSI 2 fan version. Now, I actually got this secondhand, very, very cheap, which is always fantastic. A lot of these other parts already were in my mining room from other builds, like this SSD. This is a 1 terabyte QVO SSD, I believe it's called. Really high disk speed on that, which does actually help more than you'd think for rentals. But we'll talk a bit more about that later. We've got this Vengeance, Corsair Vengeance. This is DDR5 RAM, 5200 megahertz, or 5600. I'm not too sure, but this Minisforum board underneath only supports up to 5600, I believe. So regardless, we'll be bottlenecked at that speed. Of course, the trusty Assassin V2 Thermalright CPU cooling fan, and just a random 750 watt PSU that we've had lying around, all sitting on these really tidy little shelves. Absolutely love these things. So that's the budget build, and we'll talk about pricing at the computer, of course. But moving on down to our high-end build right here. This is our 5090. We've got the white edition Zotac triple fan 5090. This is obviously my favorite GPU and my most expensive GPU. It's actually as expensive or more expensive than some of these other mining rigs up here, which is crazy, these ASIC miners. But again, sitting on that standalone stand. We've got a B650M motherboard. We've got 64 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance 6000 megahertz RAM, a 7950X under there as well, with the exact same cooler, and a 1000 watt EVGA power supply. Really nice quality. So those are our two builds, our high end right here and our budget right up top there. But which one's better, right? So let's jump on out of the mining room, because it is stinking hot in here, onto the computer and start talking about some more of the specifics: payback periods, profits, rentability, all that fun stuff. Let's go. Now that we have seen the builds in the flesh, let's have a look at some of the pricing for some of these parts and components here. We're here on a website called PC Part Picker, and they've got a rig builder or a PC builder. But basically what you can do is enter in any of your different parts, your hardware, and it will give you buy brand new prices from places like Amazon, Best Buy, etc. Which, yes, obviously are a little more expensive than other places, particularly secondhand. But we're going to use these numbers as a baseline, and then we can sort of tweak them a little bit later. So for the 4060 Ti build, we've got the Minisforum BD795M. That's the motherboard and CPU combo. They don't have it here listed on PC Part Picker, so we've picked an approximate price to match. We've just thrown in a random 9800X 3D. $460. Now this is all in US dollars, of course. We've got the Thermalright, the trusty Thermalright Assassin cooler on there, $35. We've got our RAM. This is SODIMM RAM, 5600 megahertz. We've got that Samsung 870 QVO. This is a really high disk speed. Again, a lot of these parts we'd already had, right? So we already had the cooler, we already had the motherboard, we already had the RAM. No, in fact, we bought the RAM, we already had the SSD, we already had the power supply, and we bought this video card, the 4060 Ti, 16 gigabyte video card, right? There's no point buying the 8 gigabyte model of the 4060 Ti. It just would not make sense, right? And it wouldn't get rented. Nobody wants 8 gigabyte stuff anymore. That came in at about $480. I did get mine second hand. It was a little bit cheaper than that. And that rounded out to about $1,250. So if you were to build this budget build, quote unquote, now budget obviously is up to you, how you want to define that, but this is how I'm defining it. This is the cheapest rental rig we've got. So about $1,250, you'll get all of these parts brand new. Jumping on over into this 5090 build. This is actually a pretty accurate pricing for what I paid for a lot of this stuff, because I did buy a lot of it brand new. So starting from the top, the 7950X CPU, I bought that brand new as soon as it came out, and it cost me about 500 USD or so. We had the cooler. We've got the same coolers pretty much on everything. We had to buy the motherboard. It was a little cheaper than this, maybe about $50, $60. The B650M-A Wi-Fi 2 has to be an AM5 motherboard, obviously, for this 7950X. The Corsair Vengeance, 64 gigabytes of RAM, DDR5. Man, RAM is super expensive. 195 bucks is about what I paid for this. We do have a more budget SSD in this one. I may upgrade that at some point. The Kingston NV3, 1 terabyte. So it's actually quite a fast, it's got quite a fast disk speed for this sort of price range. So we already had that one lying around, so we threw that in. We do have the Zotac Gaming 5090, my favorite GPU of all time, obviously, but we've got the white edition. Now, I've picked this black one just to be more representative of the price. This is about what I paid for mine. For some reason on this website, they've got the white one listed at nearly $1,000 more, which is way more than I paid for it. The power supply we had lying around as well, that's Supernova. This is a couple of $100 more than I paid for this as well, but in the idea of brand new prices, right, just to have an even baseline for ROIs and things like that, this comes out to $4,080 for the high-end build. So, you know, 3 times the price. So definitely a big chunk of change, but let's find out what they're actually making together and see which one of these is a better option if you're looking to make some passive income. First, let's check out some of the rentals on the 4060 Ti. So, spoiler alert, not nearly as many as the 5090, because I guess the 5090 is that, you know, obviously much more higher end, double the VRAM. But starting out initially when it was 0% uptime, as you can see, it took quite a while to get some jobs, if any. You know, days are passing, a week's passing here, and it's barely been online, you know, at all. We've got an hour job here, a day here. Right around this point is where we sort of started to pick up. So we've got, you know, a day, 8 hours, another day here, 4 hours, 16 hours. And now getting closer to where we are, we've got, you know, 3-day rentals, you know, another 3-day rental, a 10-day rental. So as this rig has really started to, you know, increase that uptime, it's definitely getting some longer rentals. You know, we can see a 41 Octa payout here, a 5 Octa, another 12 here, another 2 here. So started out slow, but definitely picking up. Now, one of the best aspects and kind of the reason why I bought this 4060 Ti was the competition score, right? There's pretty much no competition, and it is a really low power GPU. The whole rig is using pretty much nothing. We'll look at the actual power requirements a little bit later, but we've just come off that 10-day rental, and as you can see, there's only, what's this, 5 different 4060 Ti's online. So this is a good reason why you might want to get one of these lower end, quote unquote, GPUs for a rental build. Lower competition, and lower competition obviously means that you've got a better chance of getting this rig rented, because we can't forget that even when these things are not rented, Even though they're in low power mode, they're still sucking a little bit of juice, which is going to eat into your profits at the very end. Taking a peek now at the 5090. Now, the first thing you'll notice is we have 3 pages of rentals, and it's only been online about 30% more of the time. So definitely getting more rentals than the 4060 Ti. But generally pretty short ones. You know, we started out with these render jobs we don't like because they use a ton of power. Still profitable, obviously, but you know, higher power equals less profit. So most of them ended up being sort of Gensen nodes, things like that. There were VPN jobs. We've now turned that VPN off because it makes you no money. But you know, like, I don't know what was going on here. For instance, someone was trying to set up a rig and wait a minute, that's very strange. I haven't actually noticed that before. There you go. You find out new things every day. I've never seen this many of them. So whoever this was really struggling to get this thing set up apparently, because I would have a you know, a negative score, an online score, sorry, an uptime score or a completion score if it was an issue on my end. But this is actually quite interesting to note. And that was over a sort of 3-4 day period when it wasn't getting rented. So interesting to see there. But you know, some more reasonably priced jobs up here, 22 Octa here, then we're quiet again. So a lot more jobs, but you know, has it been making any more money? Recently, the last week or so, it's definitely started to pick up again. You know, 17 Octa here, 33, 25, 2, 4, 39. So this has definitely helped the final numbers. Jumping on into the marketplace, the first thing that we notice is there's a lot more 5090s available. And of course, the pricing is a fair bit higher, you know, 30 cents here, 25 cents, 40 cents. The demand has been really good. You know, when I first started creating these OctaSpace videos, people were concerned, you know, complaining that the price is going down. But, you know, at 35, 40 cents, these things are really profitable, even at a residential electric rate. So yes, more competition, less rented, less often, but you earn more while you're doing it. So a few things to note there. So to start out, obviously the 5090 rig is a lot more expensive, 3 times the price, but in turn, you can charge about 3 times more for this rig. So if they were all rented out at an even rate, in theory, you would be earning a similar rate for the dollars that you spend, right? The advantage of the 4060 Ti, however, is that it has a much lower power draw over time, even when on jobs and even when idle. So let's jump on over now and have a look at my actual numbers after the last few months and find out which rig is better, the budget build or the high-end build, for paying itself back and your daily profits. So what we're looking at here is all of the different rentals both of these rigs have gone through over the last about 3 months. So the 4060 Ti in the blue on the right here, and of course the 5090 in the yellow. But none of that makes any sense. What we're interested in are the actual numbers. So let's start it out. The total days online for the 5090, 67 versus 39 for the 4060 Ti. The total Octa rewards, the 5090, 248 versus 95.31. So a bit of a, you know, discrepancy there in the numbers. This works out to 3.7 Octa per day for the 5090 and 2.44 for the 4060 Ti, which I was very surprised by. I thought that was pretty interesting. The revenue per day between the two of these, $1.85 versus $1.22. Now this is pretty interesting, right? You know, only an extra 60 cents per day on the 5090, which tells us, as you saw, it spent a lot of time offline or doing really small jobs, as opposed to the 4060 Ti, which, you know, after that 10-day rental, I think that really boosted these numbers. 3 times the power, of course, for the 5090, as you'd imagine, 340 kilowatts over the last 67 days, and just 101 kilowatts for the 4060 Ti, which works out to 5 per day for the 5090 and 2.61 for the 4060 Ti. So, you know, you're using twice the amount of power, kilowatts per day, and you're getting just over twice the amount of octa for the 5090. So that sort of evens itself out there. Now at 13 cents USD, which was my electricity rate, 66 cents a day for the 5090 and 34 cents for the 4060 Ti. So again, about double, which leaves us, interestingly enough, over the lifetime I've had these two rigs online, the 5090's only made $1.20 per day profit over the last 67 days, real numbers, and 88 cents for the 4060 Ti. We saw those rig costs before, brand new parts, about $4,082 versus $1,246. A realistic, at current rate, 3,430 day payback period. 10-year ROI at these current rates. So, is that a good thing? I would say probably not. Would I be going out and buying another 5090 rig, brand new parts? Absolutely not. The 4060 Ti, however, at $1,246, comes down to a 1,412 day ROI. So still 4 years to pay this thing off. So you're comparing a 10-year payback period, I should say payback period, sorry, not ROI, versus a 4-year payback period. The 5090 versus the 4060 Ti. Obviously the 5090 is making you slightly more profit today, but for 3 times the price, I hardly think that's worth it, especially with the competition on the 5090. You know, say you got these half price, or you got these much cheaper secondhand, you took $1,000 off that rig, and, you know, say you took $400 off this rig, things are obviously starting to look a lot better. Still a 2,590 day ROI versus a 900 day ROI. Why am I saying ROI? Payback period, I should say. So at this stage, I think the 4060 Ti, if you're looking, you know, to pay this thing back or pay back your, you know, just the hardware itself faster, but, you know, the 5090 is probably going to give you more options as far as rentability and slightly better per day profit, but of course more expenses as well. So those are the numbers, guys. Definitely surprising when I did those myself and found out what my rigs are actually projecting. I would not have thought I was looking at a, you know, 10-year payback period on the 5090, but hey, here we are, right? Plus it's a good rider for the business. 4060 Ti's, 5060 Ti's, 5070s, AM4, you know, motherboards with, you know, 5900Xs, 5950Xs. You're going to get them secondhand, you're going to get them a lot cheaper. And if you're looking at paying yourself back for these rigs, which is the most important, I think definitely the budget build is the better option. Let me know what you guys think, you know, down below, and let me know if you've been on this OctaSpace grind longer than I have, because a lot of you may have paid off your hardware already. So interested to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Hit that like button, guys. If you liked the video, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.